having them, what I cannot even remotely imagine is why I did not intentionally make any thoughts of hurting anyone. Never.
Well, but you told Detective Dover that night, that's when you started thinking about killing your family because they just couldn't live without you. Isn't that what you told him?
Those thoughts were in my head, ma'am. They absolutely were in my head. But I was fighting those thoughts because I knew those thoughts were completely irrational and harmful.
So you knew those were bad thoughts?
Ma'am, everything that was happening to me in the month of May and the prior months were completely and totally 100% out of my total thought pattern. I did not know why I was so sick. I did not know why I was having thoughts that I was having. I did not consciously and intentionally have any thoughts of hurting anyone, including myself or anyone else. No, ma'am.
But you recognized that it was bad to think about killing your family.
I recognized that the thoughts I were having were horrible.
Okay.
And frightening.
And you knew you could have yourself committed, didn't you?
Ma'am, I was so sick. I could not think clearly. I wished I would have been able to think clearly, but I was not able to think clearly.
And you actually specifically told Detective Dover that you intentionally didn't tell anybody about all of your bad thoughts because you didn't want to go to the hospital. Isn't that what you said, Mr. Self?
If he said, and I said it on the video, ma'am, I guess what I said was, I said it. But what as far as I remembering saying that, I do not.
So on May 20th, let's see, you wander around outside for a while, eventually go back to bed, is that right?
Not on May 20th.
No, well into the early morning hours of May 20th.
Well,
right?
yes, that's correct.
And on May 20th, you get out of bed.
Yes, ma'am.
You get dressed.
The what?
You get dressed.
Yes, ma'am.
You get your car keys and your wallet, and you get into your car.
Yes, ma'am.
Fully aware of where you are and where you're going.
Yes, ma'am.
And you sit through church, and you know you're sitting there in church, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you drive to the surf and turf.
I did.
Go inside and sit with your family.
I did.
I think you said you had a bite of salad and some sips of tea while you were sitting there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Sitting looking out the window to the parking lot, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you tell Diane that you have to get a Tylenol. I think that's what you testified to, wasn't it, Mr. Self?
Yes, ma'am.
Something about a headache?
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
right? Now, you've had headaches since, what, 2009? A long time, haven't you?
Severe.
But you testified that you didn't want to embarrass your family because you felt like you were going to start getting shaky and trembly.
Yes, ma'am. The same nervousness was coming on very, very strong. And I even remember when I placed my fork down to the salad, I could see my hands trembling. The thoughts that I had at that point were, I did not want to embarrass my family.
There were no other customers in that part of the restaurant, were there, Mr. Self?
I don't recall seeing anyone in that. I thought somebody was behind us all along, but it could have just been the staff. I was thinking there was a couple maybe behind us, but I don't recall for sure. I just remember watching my grandson, and he was acting up, and I remember trying to focus on him, trying to keep my focus on him. And he was doing some dance, and I remember acknowledging him. But as far as what else was going on in there, I don't remember.
But again, you said you were concerned about embarrassing your family, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So this was another moment where you were more concerned with keeping up appearances than asking for help, wasn't it?
No, ma'am.
Your son is a police officer? Isn't that right, Josh?
Yes, ma'am.
And he was there that day?
He was.
And your future son-in-law, Alex, he's a police officer, and he was there that day, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you had people who could help you in that moment.
I've always had people around me all through this illness that could help me, and I had continually reached out to the majority of my family for help, and I continually asked them for help, and they did, in my opinion, everything that they knew to do. Josh, specifically, I can remember Josh, not necessarily that day. I was not aware that he came just for me. I was not aware of that until after all of this happened, and he testified. Well, I think my wife had told me later, or my brother, that Josh had came there, or either I got that in some form of communication, that he had came there just to support me. But they all knew, as far as I know, that I needed help. And they were doing, as best I can remember, everything they could possibly do. The only thing that none of them did do, and I have prayed to God a million times since this happened, that I wished anyone at that table, Josh, Alex, his dad, my wife, my daughters, I wish to God when I stood up that I wish to God that they knew that something was really bad wrong, and they would have physically restrained me. I do wish they had.
Mr. Self, maybe if you had been honest and forthcoming with information with your family, they would have been able to stop you from doing the things you did.
That's incorrect.
Okay. So you go out to the parking lot and you get into your car. Isn't that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're aware of where you are and what you're doing. Isn't that right?
At that point, I am aware. I am aware of where I am. What I wished I could describe, I really sincerely wish I could describe to you today the irrational thought pattern and how it would relate to a normal way of thinking. I had no normal, nothing was normal about what I was thinking at all that day or the day before, and even the day before that.
So
I wished I had a way to put that into words, but I don't.
Okay. So you get into your car and you turn on the ignition, don't you?
Yes, ma'am.
And you proceed to drive around the parking lot, don't you?
Yes, ma'am.
And you line yourself right up straight with that handicap ramp, didn't you?
I don't remember exactly. I don't remember seeing a handicap ramp in particular, no, ma'am. I just remember that I pulled and faced the building, and I drove into the building, ma'am. But nothing, not one bit of what I did was an intentional, willful act. I can't say any more to add to that. It was completely irrational. It was completely 100% out of anything I have ever thought since I've been alive.
And knowing your family was inside, you plowed right into the side of that restaurant, didn't you?
Actually, that occurred, ma'am.
The police come, and EMS comes. everyone working, trying desperately to save your family, right?
I'm sure they were.
And your thoughts are along the lines of what you said to Tracy Philbeck, right? You wanted attention and you got it.
I said that to him?
You did say that to him, Mr. Self.
Okay, well, I'm sure if I said that to him that he wanted attention, I don't doubt that if they say I said that, I must have said that.
What do you mean by that, Mr. Self?
I don't know. Ma'am, I wished I knew the answer to all of your questions. I really wished I knew the answer to what happened to me on May 20th. I really wished I did not, as my wife testified, that she couldn't remember anything. I have wished many times that I couldn't, but in a way, it was so horrible. It was so horrible that I feel like now that would have been selfish for me now not to be able to remember it. It's just that what I was thinking or saying, I don't feel like I had any control over.
So you get to the jail and you're asking for favors. Isn't that right?
I'm sure I was the only thing I remember thinking about when I got to the jail. I had been told, I think either Tracy, when I first got there, I remember at the scene, I think he came up to the car, opened the door, and told me, I remember him saying, I just want you to know I care about you and I love you, but Kate's dead and possibly Amanda. And that's all I knew at that point. I didn't know about Diane. I didn't know about Josh. I didn't know as what little bit of thought I had was there could have been a lot of people hurt, and I was so afraid that that was the case. So when I got to the jail, I was trying desperately, and I don't remember what time after getting there. I don't remember the time, but I was desperately wanting to get in touch with Taylor because I knew Taylor was okay because she had also come to the window. And I said, I have to get a hold of Taylor. I was wanting to get a hold of Taylor for many reasons. But during that night, during the time I was at the jail, I was in and out of freezing. I was freezing as if I was cold, sweating. I was laying in the floor, off the bunk, into the floor, back and forth. And the only thing I could think of is I wanted desperately to talk to Taylor. And I did ask the deputies. I asked them, please let me get in touch with her. So I desperately, whether you call it a favor, whatever you want to call it, I wanted to talk to my daughter.
Well, you never asked Detective Dover to talk to Taylor, did you? You asked him to talk to Alan Cloninger, the sheriff, and Tracy Philbeck, the county commissioner. Those were the people you were asking for when you were being interviewed, weren't they, Mr. Self?
Ma'am, what I said in that interview, I said because I heard it. What I was thinking in that interview, I cannot relay that to you. But I heard the interview, I listened to it, and I heard what I said. All I know is what little bit of thought I had, I was wanting somebody that I knew was okay to check on my family.
But you didn't even ask Detective Dover about your family, did you? Not a single time did you ask how anyone was.
I don't think I did, ma'am. According to that video, I did not.
So, Mr. Self, then you get to Central Prison where you described yourself as being very heavily medicated. Wasn't that right?
They gave me a lot of medicine, yes, ma'am.
You said you were just sleeping all day and all night.
A lot of the time. That's all I can remember. Definitely the first week or two, maybe longer, was I would lay down, go to sleep. They would bring me my food. I would get up, go back to sleep. They would bring me more meds. I'd go back to sleep. And then the psychologist would come around for an hour or so or less, and then I would go back to sleep.
So it took a little while to get out from underneath all the medication they put you on at first and to regain your clear head. Is that what you testified to?
It took, I was very dizzy. I can remember the officers making fun of me because when I would stand up to try to get my lunch tray, I was about to fall, and I remember hearing them joking about me not being able to stand up to get my meal trays. But as time progressed while I was there, my thought pattern improved very slowly, but it was improving.
And you indicated that you actually reached out to the warden so that you could try and get off of protective custody, wasn't that right?
Much later, this would have been well over a month later, when they had asked me if I wanted to be protected. I naturally wanted to be protected, but I did not know what that meant in their terms. Their terms, it meant you stayed locked down, you couldn't eat anything, you couldn't have anything at all. You couldn't, and I wanted out. I wanted out of that cell very badly, like the other people were. And so when I told the psychologist that I wanted out, he said, well, you asked for protective custody. And when I explained to him, I said, I didn't know what that meant. He said, oh, I understand. He said, I'm going to try to get you off of it. And he went and came back to me, and he said, we're working at getting you off of protective custody. He said, but it may take a while. And so I desperately wanted to talk to somebody. And I wasn't aware, I couldn't use the phone anyway at that time. But that was my hopes, that I could get out of that cell and get on the phone and try to get my daughter on the phone.
And part of your complaint was that the prison food was so terrible, right? So you wanted to be able to buy food from the commissary and things like that?
I saw the other guys when they moved me to a different portion of the hospital there. I saw all of the other guys eating snack food and different things, and I was very hungry, and I wanted to be able to buy some myself. They had sent me a receipt that says your brother has put money on your account, and I said, well, how can I access that? They said, you can't, you're on protective custody. It was just like a cycle. You know, how can you get help? And then they tell you it was very frustrating, ma'am, but I did want food.
The jail food's not very good here either, is it?
The jail food here is better than it was up there. I mean, it's not like being able to go out to a nice restaurant, but the jail food so far that I've had here in Cleveland County is much better than the food I got up there.
Well, you actually asked somebody to go out and get you lunch yesterday, didn't you? So you wouldn't have to eat the jail food?
Ma'am, I was simply, when I walked to the door there, the officer said it's lunchtime, and one of them said something about, and I said, I did say that it would be nice to be able to go get something other than a bologna sandwich. I did say that. Okay. But I didn't say that to mean any harm toward the Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
By the way, I would like to say the Gaston County Sheriff's Department, and I don't know if Sheriff Chroniger's in here or not, they have treated me with the utmost respect. All of these officers have been very kind and professional from the day I came here until today.
So, Mr. Self, you said that by August of 2018 that your head had cleared, the meds had cleared out and leveled out, and that you were pretty much back to normal and back to feeling. Wasn't that right?
No, ma'am, not completely. But there was a lot of improvement. There was a lot of improvement by August. I think that's when I got out of the solitary confinement type area. I think it was August. I'm not sure exactly. It would have been maybe the middle of August.
And as you were talking about your feelings coming back yesterday while you were testifying, you jumped straight to being concerned about your own safety, didn't you?
I was concerned about my own safety.
You didn't say you were overwhelmed with sadness and with guilt over what you'd done. You said you were concerned about your own skin. Ma'am,
the only way I know, that's what I did say, but to follow up on that, the sadness and the remorse and the hurt that I've had for what happened has been indescribable. I can't describe it.
Okay. Once you got out of protective custody, you were able to start making a lot of phone calls to your family. Isn't that right?
Eventually, I was able to make phone calls, correct.
Okay. And I think that your wife and Taylor testified that they speak to you very regularly, sometimes multiple times a day.
Yes, ma'am. The only thing that I look forward to each day is talking to Taylor and Diane and my mom and my brother, and that's the highlight of my day, is being able to talk to my daughter and my wife especially, and then others.
And even from Central Prison, you were giving Taylor and Monty and instructions on what to do with the business, and telling them about making sure bills were being paid, and still providing them with that control that you had done all their lives.
Ma'am, I handled all of the finances for my home life. That was in several different banks, and that Diane didn't even know where everything was. And of course, I knew she was, recovering from her injuries. I handled her dad's accounts. I was the power of attorney for her dad and had his banking information, and I paid his bills, and I knew that they would desperately need to know where the money was, how to get the money in, to try to get the money into their name. So I was making sure that Taylor or someone, prior to going in many years ago, I had a power of attorney to Diane. She had one to me. The one that had to do with her dad did not allow us to do it was drawn up. One attorney told us later it had been drawn up incorrectly. Diane was second power of attorney for her dad, but for some reason we always had a hard time allowing her. I knew that they needed access to the money we had. I knew that the company and my employees and my finances at the company needed to be handled. I was very, very worried about my family's ability to get in touch and handle all of the finances. That was a concern, yes, ma'am.
You were even telling Diane in phone calls how to be working with her physical therapy and how to be doing those things, weren't you?
I don't remember exact conversations, but I do remember she was telling me that she was in therapy, and all I was doing, ma'am, was trying my best to help, as I had all my life, tried to help. Ultimately, the decision was theirs. I had no way of. I just wanted to make sure my family was taken care of. That's the only way I know to answer that.
But that wasn't your only goal in some of these phone calls, was it?
No, that was not the only goal.
You were actually pushing people for forgiveness, weren't you?
I don't recall. I was begging I remember a couple phone calls. I begged with Diane. She had wrote me letters that early on, I got a couple letters from her, and she told me in those letters that she loved me unconditionally, that she had forgiven me, and that she was so sorry that she was not able to help me. And
But Mr. Self, you knew that your son Josh had asked that you not contact him at all, didn't you?
yes, ma'am, my brother had told me that Josh did not want me to contact him.
So you enlisted others to try and reach out to him instead, right?
No, I went through my brother. Anytime I felt like, I don't recall going to anyone else. I desperately wanted to talk to my son, but I don't recall talking to anybody other than my brother about Josh, and he would simply say to me that he's in touch with Josh, he's having conversations with Josh, but I don't recall reaching out to anyone else, ma'am. Early on in August, when I first got access to a phone, I don't know the date. I don't even know the month when things got clearer. I noticed over time my thought pattern got clearer, but I don't recall, to answer your question, I don't recall, other than my brother. I may have asked Diane or Taylor had they talked to Josh, but other than trying to get somebody to communicate with him, I don't recall that.
You don't recall asking folks to talk to Austin, to talk to Josh on your behalf?
No, ma'am.
Or trying to get people to read a certain book so that they could forgive you? I think it was called maybe The Shack, something like that.
I had read that book, and I liked that book, and I just simply remember telling Diane, I said, I wish Josh would read this book.
Okay.
Because I desperately wanted forgiveness from my son.
And Tracy Philbeck, you talked to him from the jail too, from the prison, didn't you?
Early on, I talked to him some, yes, ma'am.
A fair amount, actually, early on, didn't you?
I don't remember how much.
And now he's the one who you had been traveling with and going to strip clubs with and going to the massage parlors with, right?
To say with, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
If you would like a number of times, I'll remember that information.
So sometimes with Tracy, sometimes by yourself. That's a yes or no question.
Yes, sometimes with, sometimes by myself. That's correct.
Okay. And he's county commissioner, as we've heard, right?
Is he a county commissioner? Yes, ma'am.
And he was back then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the two of you, let me rephrase that. As you would talk to him, didn't you start making jokes about, hey, Tracy, maybe you can get elected and go up to Washington and then you can give me a pardon if I get convicted of this? Didn't you?
If you say that's recorded, I'm sure it is. I don't remember it.
You don't remember laughing and saying, oh, or maybe you can run for governor on the platform so I can pardon my buddy?
I don't remember that, ma'am.
Or commenting, hey, you know Trump. You've got a connection with Trump. Maybe you can get me pardoned if I get convicted. You don't remember any of that?
I remember some talk about that early on. Yes, ma'am.
I have one last question for you, Mr. Self. This really is just all about you, isn't it?
No, ma'am. It's not.
Okay. I don't have anything else, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
I don't have further questions.
You can step down, sir. Yes, sir. Further evidence for the defense.
This is a slideshow that Mr. Self has asked place before. I've spoken with the state about that, and I believe they are.
We have no objections, Your Honor.
Okay, and they're going to assist with the equipment. Okay, thank you.
I'll tell the court it's only about a minute and a half.
And so Defense Exhibit 3 and its contents will be admitted into evidence. Thank you.
With court's permission to cover.
Yes, sir.
I was just going to stand here so we can get the part back out.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
All right, and in this matter, due to the fact that there are minors also reflected in some of the exhibits in Defense Exhibit 3, the court would also order that this would be sealed as well to protect the minors. Yes, sir.
Perfect last question, right?
That would be the difference.
Further evidence for the state.
Nothing else.
And any victim impact that the state would like to present further outside the evidence for the hearing. Any victim impact?
Do you want to do it now or after closing?
Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time, as you might imagine, when emotions might run high. So please, if something that you hear during our impact statements becomes overwhelming, if you could please just excuse yourself and try not to make too much noise in our audience so that I might hear. Thank you.
Your Honor, we will need one moment.
Yes, sir.
Their officers will get a piece of paper that his father wants to read from.
Yes, sir.
That's fine. Please, the court. We have Amanda's father, and he's going to feel better sitting.
Okay.
This way.
And sir, as I've told the other people, you can take your mask off if you feel comfortable doing so.
Don't be mad at me. I might talk till 5, so I don't have to put that mask back on. My name's Tommy George. I was Amanda Self's dad. Amanda was born to her mother and me June the 15th, 1982. Amanda was Daddy's girl, and Amanda loved to fish. And as she got older, she loved to hunt. She hunted squirrels and rabbit with me, but her husband Josh and her started going fishing and hunting together. And Josh and Amanda's real good friend Brooks and Ashley Luckadoo, they clean deer and all that, and Amanda and Josh learned how to clean deer. Amanda, my daughter, she could take that deer, shoot it, skin it, gut it, cook it. She was an outdoor type person. She always wanted to play volleyball, baseball, softball. Amanda loved her sports. She always was very competitive. Amanda was into baseball and all with her kids. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. She always wanted to be a vet, but neighbor down the street, she had cats and all. Amanda went in there one day, and when she was sitting there, I walked in, Amanda was there, and when I walked in, she looked like Mickey Mouse. Her face was so swollen, and she always wanted to be a vet, but that knocked it out. And from that day on, she always wanted to be a nurse. She went to Greensboro for 1 year, and she was homesick. She come back and went to Gaston College. She went to Gaston College for 3 years, and she made ER. ER nurse, and she worked there for a couple years, and the first infant that she lost as being a nurse, she come home and crying, and that was the only story she ever really told me about the ER. And an infant had died on her that day, and her charge nurse had crawled all over her because she was crying, and the doctor stood up for her and said, leave her alone, let her cry. It's the first baby that she's ever lost. A couple years later, she made charge nurse. She was over the ER. She had 30 employees that worked under her, and Amanda was a heck of a worker, and she was a hard worker. And she ran that ER like it was supposed to be ran. And the policemen, even the doctors have always told me, that girl stood up. She knew how to run that ER. She knew how to run it. And her catchphrase, whenever they did the eulogy at her funeral, was, "We've got this, let's go." That was always Amanda saying in ER, "We've got this, let's go." And she was in nursing, I guess, 13, 15 years, somewhere along there. She went in nursing in 2005. She passed away in 2008. 13 years. And she made the ER charge nurse before then. But in 2012, her mother was diagnosed with Pick's disease. It's an aggressive form of dementia. It's at the frontal lobe. And the lifespan for Kathy would have been maybe 6 to 8 years, and she was 58 and I was 55. Kathy was 3 years older than me. And I was praying that she would make it until I was 62. And she made it until I was 59. And I'd been at Freightliner for 32 years. But whenever I saw that her mother could not drive, and I was afraid that she would kill herself or kill somebody else, I went on Thursday, June the 29th, and I told the union there to get my stuff ready. I went back June the 30th, 2016, and that was Kendall's birthday. I'll never forget that, but I left then. I was 59, and I went from an $85,000 a year job to $1,400 a month. I wasn't old enough yet, and I had a pension, wasn't old enough for Social Security. And after insurance, taxes, and all that, I brought home $1,100 a month. And I cared and made enough sacrifices for my wife. She was so good to me, I was not going to put her in a home. And I loved her so much, I was not going to put her in a home. But it was easy living on $1,100 a month. It was so simple. And Kathy, probably about, well, after I retired, she was almost at the stage that she couldn't chew or swallow, and she was a kid. She turned into a kid. She had diapers and things like that. And I had never done any kind of caring for people. I mean, it's just, I learned on the fly. And about a month and a half, ever so often, Amanda would take and watch her mom for me. She was her caregiver too, just to give me a break, because it was just so stressful. But you learn on the fly. But it was a pleasure to watch my daughter. I'd do it. I mean, my wife. I'd do it again. And Amanda would. She worked such long hours. That's what amazed me about her. She'd work such long hours and work all day, and she'd come home, clean the house, or she loved to cook, and she loved her kids. She was so involved with Kendall and Caleb. And just, Caleb was in the coach pitch. Kendall was in volleyball and softball both. And it seemed like every day one of them would be playing a game, and we'd always run. But Kathy and me, we watched Kendall and Caleb for a long time. They would stay at the house probably at least every other weekend. They loved doing that. But the last time I talked to Amanda was at church on that Sunday, May the 20th, 2018. I always greeted at the church, and I always greeted at 9:30, went to men's Bible study, and greeted at 11 o'clock, and then went 11 o'clock service. And whenever Amanda would come in, she would take her mom would stand there with me, because she'd take her in and keep her with her while she was in service and let me do everything outside. But I remember that morning Kate came in. I said, "Hey girl, where you been? I ain't seen you in 3 weeks." And she said that they was going to go eat at Surf and Turf. And I think Officer Lomick was on duty that day. Kate knew him real good. And I got to give her a hug, and I kissed her, and I said, "I love you, Kate. Don't make yourself be a stranger again." I'm glad I got to hug her, because I never got to see Kate again ever after that. Then gradually, Amanda, Josh came in. I said, "What are y'all doing here?" She said, "We're going to go to the Surf and Turf Lodge. We're going to eat dinner with his family. Then we're going to the lake and put the pontoon boat in for the summer." I said, "Daddy, I'll call you whenever I get home." So everything went well, and whenever they come out at 9:30, I was walking, and Roger was walking out, and I remember he always looked me in the eye, always. and says, "Morning, Tommy, how you doing?" But that morning he kept his head down, just walked on. Said, "Morning, Tommy." He never looked at me in the eye. And as many hearings as all I've came since then, that man never looked me in the eye. He knew, to me, he knew what he was going to do that day. He knew it to me. But that's just in my feeling. He knew it. If my daughter had been afraid of him at any time in her life, she would have told me. My daughter told me everything. I knew everything about everybody in that family. But my daughter was mature and grown up enough that she would tell me everything. "Amanda, you need me to help you there?" "No, Daddy, I can handle it myself." "Well, if you ever need anything, you just let me know." But she was such independent. She handled her own problems. She was that good of a woman. But whenever I got home from church that day, Kathy had sold her diaper, and I was changing her diaper. Phone rang. Now, before I left the church, I was going to have an ablation done May the 23rd. And Carrie, she was there, and I said, "Carrie, I've got to have a ablation. Amanda's going to take me that day, and y'all put me on the prayer list." And she said she would. So I got Kathy, and we went home, and phone rang. And by the time I got her diaper changed, I hadn't answered. It rang again, and I picked it up, and it was Jonathan Pugh. He was associate pastor at the church. And he said, "Tommy, you at home?" I said, "Yes, this is my home phone." He said, "I need to come talk to you." I hung out, and I said, "That's odd. I just told Carrie and them to pray for me. They didn't have to do nothing else." When he walked through the door, he walked in, he said, "Tommy, there's been a bad wreck." "Amanda, it looks bad for Amanda." I said, "Jonathan, you tell me right now if she's dead. Don't you BS me or not. You tell me the truth if she's dead." He said, "No, she's in bad shape." I said, "What about the kids?" He said, "Kendall had a cut, but Caleb's going to be all right." And I got Kathy. I didn't even have time to get diapers, nothing. And she always had diapers. She went through a ton of diapers. But I didn't get none. And usually, whenever I go off, I give her baby food or food that's already ground up. I put back in jars. Whenever we got to the emergency room, some friends that used to go to the church, Steve, Holly Williams, and Courtney Williams, was standing outside the emergency room. And Courtney's sister, Lauren, Amanda, had got her a job at the ER, at the hospital for her. And Steve, I loved him to death, but they had left Venture then, and they beat a lot of people there. And whenever I come out, they said, "Amanda just left on the first helicopter." Kendall was on the helipad. She was on the helipad with Austin, said she was next. They took us to the hospital. Whenever I got there, I looked up. I said, "Darn, Kendall just getting here?" My daughter wasn't the first one. My daughter was the second one. And that was her helicopter coming in right then. But we went inside, and a woman had, evidently they knew a lot of people was coming and all, and they had it, a woman already had it organized. They already had a room set up and all. Whenever we went in, I remember Taylor saying, "Don't hate my daddy." And I didn't know what it was then. I didn't know what it was. But when I found out, I wouldn't hate him. I despised the SOB. That's what I would have said. But I didn't know till later. I didn't know. But everything was organized, and the doctor, that spokeslady come in, she said, "There'll be an update as soon as possible from the doctor whenever he comes down." And I'm not exactly sure what time, what it was, because Lauren, she put Kathy in a wheelchair, and she watched her for me in case I had to go anywhere. Had doctor come down, and first person he talked about, first patient, Kendall, he said, "She got staples in her head, and she seems to be okay, but they wasn't sure if it's going to keep her overnight or not." The elderly woman, she's broke up pretty bad, real bad, but it's going to take time, but they think she's going to be okay. As for the last one they brought in, she had 2 cardiac arrests coming over, and there wasn't nothing they could do for her. And it eat me so bad that I was glad Steve and Holly and Courtney was there, but I wish they hadn't have been. I could have went in and been with my daughter, and she was alone when she died, Your Honor. She was alone. I asked the doctor, I said, is it okay if I could do my daughter's body? And he said, yes, but it'll take time. And gradually they worked us in, and I remember Austin walked in with me too, and as soon as I got in, I'll never forget her laying there, and I still have this nightmare to the day. They had her laying there, her eyes taped close, 3 tubes sticking out of her. Her body's swollen where they pump so many fluids in her trying to sleep. And all they would let me do was run over her like a dog, and all they let me do is pat her hand like a dog because she was still listed as evidence. I wished I hadn't looked at her in a way, but I'm glad I did but I still had that nightmare. I hadn't slept in 2.5 days. I keep having that nightmare. I can see her laying there on that gurney and my eyes stayed closed. Them 3 tubes sticking out, me patting her hand. The doctor, the spokeswoman said they probably would keep Kendall overnight for observation. And it hit me then. I said, I've got her mother here. I ain't even got diapers. The hospital couldn't even hardly, I think they furnished 1 diaper, I'm not sure. Lauren was checking on that, but Carrie, Austin's, the pastor's wife, she ended up staying with Kendall that night. But they wanted me to tell Kendall before I left that her mother was dead. Austin went in there with me too. Kendall saw me, and we walked in another room. Then they took us in when the counselor for the kids was there, and she told me, be blunt, don't say her mother passed away. Tell her her mother is dead. She was sitting on bed. She raised up, and I sat down beside her. I said, Kendall, I said, you know, whenever that car come through that window, I said, that Kendall, that car is so strong, the metal is so strong, and he hit her so fast, baby. I said, they tried so hard to save your mommy. They tried so hard, Kendall. But I looked her right in the eye and said, Kendall, your mommy's dead. She cried. I just held her. You just got to imagine what it's like to tell that kid that her mother's dead. And thank you. They wanted me to stay all night, but Carrie did. Then the next morning I went. They wanted me to check Kendall out. She was going to come out, but I went to the waiting room. And there I was checking on Josh. Josh was in a coma. And they had him, I think they might have induced the coma on him, but they had him out so he wouldn't wake up. Kendall was going to come in about dinner time that day, but they wanted me to tell Caleb. Sissy says she wanted to be there. Sissy would be being Kendall. And we waited, and whenever Kendall came in, I said, you want to say something to him? You tell him, Papa. And we was in a little square, probably 6 chairs in there, and Rita, Josh's mom, had him on the lap, but the little boy knew something was up. I said, Caleb, when Sissy walked in, I said, come here, Caleb, sit on my lap. And whenever he sat on my lap, I said, buddy, what I'm going to tell you is going to hurt you. I said, buddy, it's going to hurt the heck out of you, and Papa don't want to hurt you. Papa never hurt you in his life. I said, I told him the same thing I told Kendall. I said, Caleb, you know when that car hits Mommy, I said, it hurt her so bad, baby, they couldn't help her. Caleb, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you. Caleb, your Mommy's dead. I've never heard a child scream like that ever. Even after I come back with him, there's an officer, Pilkington, with the county police. Says, God, I never want to hear a kid scream like that again ever. And I picked him up straight up on my shoulder, and I knew Josh was in a coma. I said, scream, buddy, cry your little eyes out, buddy, scream. I'll cry with you and scream too. I said, but when we get to this room, I said, Daddy's got boo-boos you ain't never seen before. I said, Daddy, it's hurt her so bad. You and Sissy's got to be strong for him. I didn't want Josh to die. Amanda died too. God. Whenever I got to I see you had to pick the phone up and say, I said, Self, and whenever we walked in, he quit crying, and we took him out. I took him in that first room and patted his eyes dry and all that, and whenever we went in, Josh was laying there just in that coma. He was tore all to crap. I mean, he was tore all to crap. Caleb walked, I said, stand right there, and Sissy stood on this side of him. Pat his hand, touch him. I said, y'all here for Daddy. Y'all can be strong for Daddy. Amanda would have been so proud of those kids. They knew they needed their daddy after losing their mama. Next day, we went to the waiting room, and Josh was in a coma, and they were supposed to open him up from it. The doctor told it was me, Rita, and Josh's stepdad, Scott. Whenever we went up, the doctor had told them to make sure I told him just what he asked and not what I want to say. And he woke up and he just said, I can't remember if he said where am I or what, but how are the kids? Kendall had a bad head injury, and Caleb's okay. Kendall's okay too, Josh. What about Diane? Diane's tore up, Josh. Diane's tore up real bad. What about Amanda? Amanda's dead. His monitor, his heart rate and pulse, which, I mean, who did it? I said, your daddy. He said, that pathetic coward. And his heart rate, I mean, I had to shut. Scott, I remember Scott telling me he thought he was going to have to slam me so I wouldn't say nothing else. That's how bad he got so mad. He was about to have a heart attack laying there. And then I walked out from it. And Kathy's mom, after we made arrangements and all, I let them hold Amanda's body until Josh would be able to attend her funeral. And whenever Kathy and me already had our cemetery plotted, Armstrong Cemetery in Belmont, we'd had it since probably 89. And I wanted them to bury Amanda beside me and Kathy, but it was already so many people. I asked David, I said, can we move ours and move it beside Amanda? At first, they said they had a cemetery up here and wanted to bury her there. They said it's free. I said, is he going to be there? Yes. I don't want my daughter ever buried with this man, ever. We went to the cemetery, and David was going to pick a pretty place out up on a hill, but Josh was in a wheelchair, and I said, David, just put us beside the road. And I said, it don't matter. They're not going to be in there anyway when we die. That way Josh can come out to the limousine, and they can just take him straight, and it made it so much easier. But Amanda's buried at her mama's feet right now. And the hospital loved that girl so much. They made a $50,000 scholarship in her honor every May the 20th. They loved that girl. That girl was that hospital. She loved her job. She didn't ask to be killed. Neither one of them did. It's unreal. Usually Gastonia has an adopt-a street. Adopt a highway. They let me adopt a street. Court Drive, it's the one the hospital's on, probably a mile long. And a lot of people ask me, and it's got in memory of Amanda George Self. A lot of times we'll have ribbons, doves, whatever underneath it. And a lot of people ask me, let me go help you clean it up. That's the only way I get to honor my daughter, picking up trash. And in memories. But every memory of her and her mom was awesome. And I'll go walk it by myself a lot of times because that's my free time to talk to my daughter. Takes about an hour and a half to go up, an hour and a half to come down. And that's where I get to talk to my daughter at. That's the only time I get to talk to my daughter. Ma'am, that's my daughter. That's the only thing I get to look at and remember my daughter. She was beautiful. And that smile she's got, that smile stay with you forever. And he took it away from her. Then losing her at the losing Amanda, if I would have died first, I would have never have known about this girl. I walked in the grocery store one day, and one said, Amanda's that Tommy? I said, yes, ma'am. Amanda saved my baby. She saved my baby. I'd have never known it. Amanda never bragged about. After she's told me about that baby story, Amanda never said another thing, ever. And her and Daddy was so close, and we could talk. But that girl would keep her job herself. She'd go save somebody's life, go on, move on with her job. I was in Walmart one day, and the cashier said, you're the guy that lost the daughter, ain't you? I said, yeah. She saved my grandpa. I'd have liked to know how many lives she'd have got to save. He got to pray people in right and left about all his life, 80s, 90s, 2020s. That was awesome. That man was a good man. He was a real good man. He was an awesome man. But that was pre to May the 20th, 2018. He threw all that away the day he murdered my daughter and Kate. He threw that away. My wife would sit at the table whenever I feed her. I kept Amanda's obituary on that table. With that disease she had, she could remember, but she couldn't communicate. That was my hardest part. She trying to move that mouth at me, trying to understand what she was saying. But she'd pick that obituary up, hold that picture to her chest, give it a little kiss, and lay it back down. I still leave that picture there, hoping my wife was still there. My wife would have been dead in July, but she knew I lost that little girl, and she was my kid too now. Kathy held on for so long. trying to be this girl that I lost. She held on to September the 7th, 2018, 3.5 months after her daughter was murdered. I bet you should have went in July. Whenever they came and I put the bed in the living room, and that was 2 o'clock that Thursday. Nurse Nina was going to stay there, and Carrie, Austin's wife, was going to stay Friday night to help me watch her. But as soon as we laid her down, by 4 o'clock, you could see them little legs already turning colors. Her blood was already shutting down. That girl, I laid her there at 2 o'clock, 10 till 6 that Friday morning. She left. She was ready to go. She left after 16 hours. That little girl of mine, it's like I've lost 2 kids and a wife in 3.5 months. And then with this COVID and all, it's been a hellish 3 years. But it's been a blessing that it took this long, I guess, Your Honor, because I've learned what a lot of people's been like. Josh told me about 6 months after it started, he said, people's watching, see how we do take this. I said, Josh, it's okay. I said, it don't matter. And I said, I probably know who told you that, but that man can't save me. You can't save me. They can't save me. Only the Lord upstairs can save me. I was 52 whenever I got saved. My wife always tried to get me saved, but I never would. The Lord could have let her lead me, but she knew she was going to wait on me. He let her keep her mind, and once she saw me get saved and baptized, he let me go. But Kathy was a youth director at Flint Groves Baptist Church. And when she passed away, there was so many people that even said how much that woman touched her life. There's a deputy sheriff, his name's Brian. He fell in the shower and he has to take disability now. I can't remember Brian's last name, but Brian Goodson. And he come up to me, he said, I'm going to tell you this, that was the best woman that I ever had. She always kept Amanda in church, and Amanda was a kids only church. It was kindergarten through 5th grade, and whenever Drew and his wife, they adopted a child overseas, and they vetted me and background checked me, and I went and watched, and the first day my daughter was on that stage and had them kids, damn, that's my daughter. I mean, her mom gave her the perfect heart she desired, and I could see her mother in her there right then. And right now the only peace I got is knowing that my 2 girls are together. Don't nobody want to wish their daughter dies before them. Nobody does, but if anybody deserved each other, them do. But I wanted to swap places with my daughter so bad, but it ain't gonna happen. As for this guy, I'm a Christian, I forgive him, but I will never ever forget him. I'll never forget this man. I hold no hate or animosity, but there's something I just can't accept here. He destroyed so many people's lives. He destroyed so many, all those nurses that took care of all those EMTs, nurses, and paramedics that once they realized they was working on Amanda, Josh, and Kate, then even after 3 years during the testimony, they still have tears from losing those kids, that Kate and Amanda. And it's amazing, those two still touch those people's hearts. And all the employees that worked at the sheriff's office that was Kate's co-workers. And if I ain't mistaken, they had to move her shift that Sunday night to another week, had to cancel it for a week, knowing what they'd have probably done. And all those surf and turf employees molesting her kids, having to look at the first hand, those kids saw more blood, horror, chaos in 2 hours than we see in our lifetime. Kids scarred. Kendall told me that day that Poppy said he had a headache, told her he was going to have a headache, he was going outside, get a goodie powder. But she remembers him staring at her when he come through that building. Caleb, he remembers his mama underneath that vehicle that day. All these people talk a good talk about how good a man Roger was, but in the 80s, and all the good deeds he's been done, we all watched more than 10 people parade through here vouching for his character, but I wish one of them would have done an involuntary commitment on him. When I even noticed the first glance that my wife was ill, I sacrificed everything I had in this world to care and love for her. I'd never want her to do anybody's life like that, ever. He may have been a good man, but on May 20th, 2018, that changed. He made a choice to leave that restaurant. He got in that car and he drove around that parking lot and he sat up at the top. He could have easily gotten his car and drove away. He could have driven himself off a cliff. He could have left for a day and leave and come back. He could have driven to another state and started a new life, anything of that. But that man, he stomped that gas. And it was his two hands that steered through that window. And it was his hands that took that man, that man, he took my grandson and my granddaughter's mama. They won't never ever get another mother, ever, never. And 2 days after, Josh thought it was funny, but I said, Josh, I give you my blessing. Find those kids somebody to love them like Amanda did. Little Caleb, he was mama's boy. Caleb loved hugs. There's a woman back there with him right now. Her name's Amy. She gives Caleb those hugs. She's there for Kendall. All I ask you, honey, don't. That doctor, he said he could not guarantee that this man would ever do it again. Don't ever let him destroy any more lives. If he does, those grandkids was 12 and 8. Let them be old enough so they never had to worry about him destroying their lives or killing them again. Let them be old enough to where they can look after themselves. where they don't ever have to worry about him driving, Your Honor. I hope the sounds, I don't know if he's got a conscience or not. He's got to me, listen to testimony, he acts like he doesn't, but my nightmare is Amanda's 2 patches on those eyes and those 3 tubes and me patting her hand. I hope this man's nightmare, he hear those windows shattering, those walls caving in, that furniture and being shoved and busting out the back of that wall. Don't ever let him have another chance to destroy another life. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, I got nervous. That was perfect. That was perfect. I'll just miss it. Baby, you did perfectly. Can I keep up? Yes, sir.
Is there anyone else in Amanda's immediate family that wishes to be heard? Is there anyone in Kate's immediate family that wishes to be heard?
You can just stand there, ma'am. That's fine.
Is it okay if I face?
Yeah, just as long as I can hear.
Okay.
And if you can just state your name so the court reporter can get it down.
Taylor Potter.
Thank you, ma'am.
As all of you know by now, I'm Kate's older sister and Amanda's sister-in-law. Kate and I were only 17 months apart growing up, and I'm thankful that God saw me fit to be her sister.
She can't hear.
As all of you know by now, I'm Kate's older sister and Amanda's sister-in-law. Kate and I were only 17 months apart. And I'm so thankful that God saw me fit to be her sister. She was by far one of my greatest joys on this earth. My constant friend in a world that's always changing. I don't remember exactly how old I was when Josh and Amanda got married, but I was blessed with being given an additional sister to the one I already had. Kate and Amanda were cut from the same fabric. They were so much alike, and they had so much fun together. I hated being at any type of birthday party with the two of them because they were planning on whose space they could put cake in. To know them both was to know happiness. They were both so goofy, and they could make you laugh when you didn't even want to smile. Both of them loved people with their entire hearts. And I'm thankful for the time that I was given with both of them, and I know that based on the relationships that we share in Christ, that we'll be able to be with them again. They both just loved people so deeply. They cared so genuinely for those around them. It's part of what made them so impactful in the careers that they had chosen. If it's okay, I'd like to address a few members on behalf of myself and our family. To Alex, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that the life that you were planning with Kate was gone. I'm sorry for the pain that you endured then and the pain that you've endured since then. It goes without saying how much Kate loved you, and thank you for being such a huge part of what made her happy. To Mark and Georgia, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you lost the girl that was supposed to be your daughter-in-law. She was so excited to be a part of your family, and she loved you both very much. And thank you for loving her as your own. To Tommy and the George family, I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry, Tommy, that you lost the only daughter that you ever had. I'm sorry that she was not able to be with you and you lost Kathy. And for her family, I'm sorry, even family members that I haven't met, that you grieved and are grieving the loss of such a special person. Tommy, she loved you both so much, and you raised a beautiful person that we were blessed to spend 14 years with, and I want to thank you for sharing her with our family. To my brother, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you lost your spouse. The person that you leave your family for to begin your own, and the mother of your children. I'm sorry that you've had to figure out how to do this on your own. How to be the best father and mother that you can be to your kids. You've done so well, and I'm so thankful that I have you here. And I want you to know how proud of you I am. You already know how much Kate loved you, and I know how much she valued her relationship with you. To Kendall and Caleb, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you lost the beautiful person who gave you life and who loved you more than anyone on this earth. I'm sorry that you've had to deal with this type of pain at such a young age. I want you to know how proud your mom would be of both of you. I'm also sorry that you lost your aunt. She was so proud of you and loved you both very much. To both of their co-workers, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you all have suffered such a tremendous loss. They loved their jobs and the relationships that they shared with each of you. To Melissa and everyone at Surf and Turf Lodge, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you all had placed on you something that you didn't ask for. I'm sorry that you were left with not only trying to figure out how to mend your place of business, but your hearts and the hearts of your staff. Thank you to each and every staff member present that day, as it would be impossible for me to sit and name them all. Thank you for jumping in and being where you were needed. You were also helpful in our family to us, and that does not go unnoticed by our family. Kate and Amanda were deeply loved by every single person who had the pleasure of knowing them. They are missed, they are loved, and they're not forgotten. To close, I would just like to say, God has the power to redeem what we consider unredeemable, to heal what we consider fatally wounded, and to make our worst chapters our greatest victories, and that's my hope for each and every one of us who have been so tremendously impacted. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other one's not in evidence. I think you can just show it to her.
Yes, sir.
Please record if I may approach.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? You want to tell the judge who that is? Do you want to tell the judge who that is?
That's just Kate. I don't guess I need to say is anybody else.
I think any other immediate family members who wish to speak.
Is there any other immediate family? Thank you, Your Honor.
Are the lawyers ready for closing argument? Would you rather take about a 10-minute recess and then go into it?
That might be a good time.
All right. So let's take about a 10-minute recess.
Recess, 10 minutes.
I was going to say, amen.
Damn tear the whole time.
His method of let these kids be older now, they had to do it again. When the front one got taken out, the DA was closing arm. I just didn't want some.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Whatever.
Well,
Tom's interested.
watching the watch us.
We're still showing on the live
You ready for your client?
Yes, ma'am.
If you can bring in the client.
Court faculty present.
State ready? Defense ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is the state going to do opening and closing?
Yeah,
closing?
the state will not do an opening to final closing.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I listened to the evidence over the last few days, and the question is, where do you start with this? It's horrific. It's terrible. And there doesn't seem to be any reason. You listen to, as Mr. George said, you listen to the people who've known Mr. Self for years, and they talk about his character and what kind of man he was. And I will agree with Mr. George. He said he was a good man. But one thing I will differ with Mr. George on is I think that ended before May 20th of 2018. That started to end somewhere around January or February when Mr. Self started to change. It's not something that he was intentionally doing. It's something that happened to him in a way that he didn't understand it. The people around him didn't understand it. In fact, even the medical professionals that he was seeking help from didn't seem to understand exactly what was happening with Mr. Self. That's what, when you listen to Dr. Corbin, that's what became abundantly apparent. As he said, Mr. Self had been misdiagnosed. And it's one of the things where, not blaming anybody, it's perfectly reasonable and understandable in retrospect as to what happened. But the problem was, that's what happened. Mr. Self was suffering from an intense form of depression. Now, I understand what the state is going to say about how his rational thought processes and things of that nature. The first thing you've got to understand when looking at the situation was that rational thought was not what was going on in Mr. Self's head. To understand depression is not an easy thing for most people. In trying to figure out how to explain it, let me try to use some visuals. For someone like Mr. Self that everybody describes, type A personality, he's driven, he's successful, motivated, not unlike any of the people sitting in the front of this courtroom. When their mind is working normally, to use some movie images, it's sort of like the beginning of Sound of Music where Julie Andrews is in the meadow at the top of the, everything is beautiful, the birds are chirping, probably the ants are avoiding the picnic baskets. It's perfect. And that's how a normal person's mind works, especially someone who is gifted at what they do, someone who has become a pillar of their community, someone who is running a successful business. All that is what that person, that's part of their character. The problem is when depression sets in, your mind doesn't work that way. It's, again, to visit some movie things, it's like in the war movies where the person is in the woods, the snow's on the ground, and it's foggy. You can't see 2 feet in front of you. You know the other side is out there, and they're there to do you harm, but you're sensory deprived. You can't see them. You can't hear them. You don't understand what's going on. You have no information about your surroundings. When you're in the depressed state, your mind works like that. It doesn't matter what's being said to you or how it's being said. It doesn't add up. And it's frustrating to the person who is going through it. They understand their mind isn't working correctly. They don't understand why. They don't understand how to fix it. They just know it's happening. Things that they understand in their normal life, whatever is said to them, their mind would instantly trip to the correct answer. It doesn't work. Nobody seems to understand why, how, or otherwise. And it's not one of the, it goes on for a significant period of time. And when you couple with that with what Dr. Corbin told the court about not only was Mr. Self misdiagnosed, the medication that was prescribed for him was actually something that made the situation worse. The doctor's exact words were, it's like throwing gasoline in the fire. It didn't help Mr. Self. It actually made his condition worse. So the rational thought processes became further and further and further away. And the problem for the person in that situation, the person who is the one who is used to being in charge, the one who's used to being in control, the one who's driven and motivated, the one who is used to being the one that does everything. They can't control things then. They understand that. And as Mr. Self told the court, it's a frightening experience for that person. It's embarrassing. Their natural inclination is to withdraw. Just as everybody who knows Mr. Self during that period described what he did. What was the consistent thing? They described him as being anxious and not wanting to be around people. Is it rational? No. Clearly, Mr. Self had a family who loved him. You've heard from his friends. They all were trying to help him. But Mr. Self withdraws. Why? Because the thought processes going on in his head are not rational. They are incredibly different than what you would expect. Depression is not only alters your mindset and your ability to think, it alters your personality, the way you interact with other people. And the problem is, most people have no idea how to deal with it, especially severe depression, or, as Dr. Corbin phrased this, even beyond severe depression. You not only had the depression, but you also had the bipolar II disorder that was becoming pronounced, I think is the best way to put it at this point. As Ms. Self, when she was on the stand and I asked her if it was like two different people, the answer is yes, it was. There was Roger 1. That's the person that this court heard mostly of. The person who led the youth group at Hardin Baptist Church. The person who went on the mission trips. The person who helped homeless people. The person who gave of his time and his finances to help people in need. You can nitpick about why he was doing it, but the unquestionable evidence is that's what he did. He helped people. People told you about how he affected their lives while he was running the youth group. He gave it his own time, finances, efforts to do that. He didn't have to. He felt the obligation to do that for the good of mankind. And that is the man that went through, raised his family, One of the other issues is sometimes to take the measure of the man, look at the family. You saw Taylor in here. You've heard about Kate. You heard from Josh. He didn't do a bad job raising his children. All of them grew up to be responsible, articulate adults. But in late 2017, he was beset by something that affects, unfortunately, not just Mr. Self, but there's a significant number in our population who have this problem. You've heard his efforts to deal with it, his family's efforts to deal with it. And Mr. George is right. It's a shame that more wasn't done, but hindsight is 20/20. And unfortunately, when you're caught in the moment trying to deal with it, not understanding what's going on, not everything gets done perfectly, even by the professionals. When the person who drove the car into Surf and Turf Lodge on May 20th, 2018, that's Roger II. That's the man who is, what was the term Dr. Corbin used? Severely psychologically and mentally disturbed. I gathered from some of the state's questioning that they're asking Mr. Self if the reason he did that was to basically rid himself of the financial burden of his family to have a different life. When you think about the practical implications of that, rational thought leads you to believe that if you did that, you're going to sit here facing the court today looking at spending a significant, if not the rest of your life in prison. That's probably not a rational thought process to lead you to that. That is the process of a severely emotionally disturbed process. Now the question is, how do we deal with this in our criminal justice system? Clearly, Mr. Self understands there's going to be a sentence imposed by this court. And it's going to be a significant sentence. There's no doubt about that. The least he could possibly get would be 12 years for somebody at 62 years of age who's never been in trouble before. That's a significant punishment. When you look at the mitigating factors involved here, the state is true. We have agreed they're aggravating factors because under the facts of this case, they clearly exist as well. But we do feel that based on the evidence that the court has heard, the mitigating factors that the state has stipulated to outweigh those aggravating factors, and that a sentence in the mitigating range is appropriate. And given the overall situation we have here, one of the other key mitigating factors is that he has a support network in the Why? Because I'm sure the state's going to talk about the fact that Dr. Corbin said he can't guarantee he doesn't do this again. And yes, that unfortunately is one of the problems with mental health. They do tend to recur. That's the reason the people who surround that individual are very important. They have to be as vigilant as the person that has the condition. And that's the reason Taylor, his wife Diane, and the other members will be more vigilant in dealing with Roger if they're ever called upon to do so. They recognize the situation now. And unfortunately, they've had a very thorough indoctrination as to what the results of not dealing with it appropriately. And more importantly, they've sort of learned how to deal with it. Mr. Self is a man who didn't live, not going to say he led a perfect life, But in the greater scheme of what we deal with here in the criminal justice system, it's certainly more exemplary than we're used to seeing. He's a man who did many good things, and mostly for the right reasons. When the court goes to fashion a sentence for Mr. Self, we ask the court to look at those, look at everything he's done as the whole body of work. Unfortunately, when we're talking about Roger 1 and Roger 2, the gentleman the court has seen and talked to and heard from here in the courtroom, we're pretty much back to Roger 1. And he's the one that's getting sentenced for Roger 2. We ask the court to fashion an appropriate sentence, and we feel that appropriate sentence would be 144 months. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, we have been here since Tuesday. But in a sense, we've been here since May 20th. Since May 20th, 2018, it's something we have not heard. We have heard statements. We have heard explanations. We have heard rationales. We have never heard Roger Self say, "I'm sorry." Now, psychiatrists may explain a little bit first day or so. We have never heard him say it. He didn't say it on the stand. He danced and weaved and bobbed to questions. He has never said it. He has said that he wants forgiveness. Forgiveness from his son for murdering his wife. But he has never said, "I'm sorry," never appeared to show it. Again, I'm not talking about illegal. I'm not talking about legally saying, "I'm sorry." No. I'm talking about the moral obligation of a man who is killed. The moral obligation of a man who has murdered his own daughter, murdered his daughter-in-law, maimed his wife and son. God, he showed you the last thing, a video. He asked me, he said, "Hey, look at me video. It's all about me. I'm Roger Self." In those videos were the grandchildren who do not have a mother. In those videos were the mother who is not here and the daughter. Yet he chooses to show that. The doctor stated, and I don't think anybody disagrees, that Roger Self, all his life, had these DSM personalities. The narcissism, the excessive compulsive, the bipolar. And in the medical report, it shows that those start early in life. And the doctor said, and we agree, that many people are very successful with these disorders. And Roger Self was successful with these disorders. Obsessive compulsive, it is, I'm sure, been said about me. But these things used correctly. But what happened is that Roger Self broke away from his religious beliefs. Roger Self broke away from his position as a leader of the church. And he goes to a massage parlor and gets sexual gratification. Now, I'll leave it. Maybe he felt guilty the first time. But rather than going back to his faith and his beliefs, he goes again and again. And each time he is choosing by free will to do that. He is creating the guilt. He is creating the depression. It was his acts. And in the situation that he had created, the other one, with the personality of the pillar of the church, the one that everybody pointed out, that was my youth minister, the business leader. This man, by his own choices, in choosing to go to the beach, in choosing to go to the strip clubs and continually, every other month, we went 15 times over 2 years, every other month he is choosing this. Choices have consequences. He created his depression. It was when he started going. And that depression starts to manifest itself in several ways. Guilt, yeah, tremendous guilt. But also, I can't let the public know. I can't tell my own brother, yes, I am depressed. I am horribly depressed. But instead of saying, brother, this is what I've been doing, he dances around. Because that other part of him, the narcissistic part, the look at me, look at me, look at me, he can't show his sin. In the church, to Austin, he can't show because of his own pride. So the depression and the anxiety, it increases. It increases because he cannot drop the facade. Then we look at the other part of it, and that is money. This is threatening to his business. He worried every year, but this year it got worse. He would not go and get help for his depression, which was brought about by his acts, because it cost him money and the prestige and everything that money could bring him. He goes to a psychiatrist. There is doctor-patient confidentiality. He gets him on stand and says, oh, I'm afraid everybody will find that. No, he couldn't even tell a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist, I've been going to massage parlors. It's against my beliefs. I've been going to these, I've been doing all of this. He couldn't even admit that to a psychiatrist. So what he says is, give me a pill that'll make me feel better. Give me drugs that'll make me feel better, rather than in absolute confidence. He couldn't do that. And when the pills didn't make him feel better, he goes to another person. But again, doesn't tell honestly. He does not tell the truth to the doctor that could have solved this. Just give me some pills. The actions where he kills his family are the result of choices that he made. And very often in life, we may not see the eventual outcome of the choices we make, but we are responsible for them. And he is responsible because what he did in murdering his family and maiming his family would never have happened, but the choices he made and then his refusal to get honest help to cure it. Then we look at what the doctor says. Without appropriate care on an ongoing basis, it remains possible Mr. Self could again experience an exacerbation of his illness and be a danger to those around him. Well, we know from his own statement that he does not listen to doctors. If he doesn't like the way the medical treatment's going, he ignores it. We know that, as the doctor says, he has this enduring pattern of not listening. His insight regarding the nature of his illness and the need for treatment was viewed as limited. This is after he's been in central prison. Personality disorder is defined by an enduring pattern. Your Honor, we're all very aware of how many people with mental illness will not take their meds, will not listen. How many times we have recurring tragedy. And that's what his own doctor says. Now, Mr. Bean says that, well, his family will know better how to take care of him this time, now that they know about this. Now, Mr. Self won't let them. He doesn't want to take the medicine. They're not going to be able to do it. And to say that his family is going to have to do that, we've all seen families that have tried and not been able to keep somebody on medicine. Roger Self murdered his daughter and would ask the court to sentence him for that. He murdered his daughter-in-law, and we ask a separate sentence for that. He mangled and maimed his son, and we ask for a separate sentence for that. And he crushed his wife's body, and we ask for a separate sentence.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank everyone in the audience who has watched this case this week. I want to thank you for your respect and your decorum towards this matter. For the family, I can't imagine your pain. Please know that I've heard you, and I have deep compassion for your pain. I also have admiration for your courage in being here for this hearing and reliving the crimes of May 20th of 2018. I also want to say thank you to the staff and the members of the Sheriff's Department for your excellent work this week. I've listened to all the lawyers this week. They have presented their cases in this extraordinarily difficult case in an exemplary manner. All the lawyers in the state should aspire to this ideal of skill in such a case. I've reviewed all the evidence that was handed up by both the lawyers and all of my somewhat copious notes in this matter. For my judgment in the case, the court would not be persuaded that the mental health of the defendant overrode the willfulness of the acts. The court would find that the crimes were knowingly committed on the day of May 20th, 2018. And therefore, the court would find that the stipulated aggravating factors, number 8 and number 15, the court would find the mitigating factors of number 3A, 12, 17, 18, and 19. In file 18 CRS 56002, the murder of Amanda Self The court would find that's a Class B1 felony with 0 prior points. Be a minimum 230 months to a maximum 288 months. In file 18, CRS 56003, the murder of Katelyn Self. That's a Class B1, 0 prior points. Court would find a minimum of 230 to a maximum of 288 months consecutive to the prior sentence. In file 18, CRS 3634, the assault upon Joshua Self. That's a Class C, 0 prior points. Court would find a minimum of 70 to a maximum of 96 months. 18, CRS 3635, the assault upon Diane Self. That's a Class C, 0 prior points. Minimum 70, maximum 96 months. All of those sentences are within the presumptive range. Defendant would be entitled to all credit for all time being served since May 20th of 2018.
That would be 1,062 days, Your Honor.
Okay. 1,062 days. Thank you, sir. Anything else for the state in this matter?
Question of those 4 consecutive sentences.
The last two would be concurrent with the previous two, so you have 2 consecutive murder sentences. Anything else? Anything for the defendant? Would you like a moment to talk with him?
If I may have a moment.
Would you like to have a moment in the back, or would you?
In the back.
Okay, thank you. And you got down the number of credit, days of credit. I'll ask Mr. Bean when he comes in as well, but all the pieces of evidence that have been marked have been with the clerk.
That's correct. Let me check the spots. I know that,
I'll ask Mr. Bean when he comes in.
I have a question more about you get lost, put stuff in.
Mr. Bean, firstly, any pieces of evidence you have that are not with the clerk? We think we have them all.
I think I've given, I introduced 3 things and I believe the clerk
Okay,
has those.
thank you. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, Mr. Self has asked if he could simply address his family at this point.
I have no objection to that if law enforcement has no
He
objection.
has a short little
Okay.
statement that he wishes to make to everybody who was involved.
Yes, sir. Anything else that you needed to put on the record at this time?
I'm sorry?
Anything else you need to put on the record at this time?
No, ma'am.
All right. Go ahead.
Let's make sure if there's anybody who's not want to begin, Mr. Self, speak. If you want to leave, I respect that. I don't want anybody in here that...
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just, let's give them a moment to leave, and then we'll allow Mr. Self that, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I turn in the direction?
Yes, sir.
And then I wanted to say something to you in closing.
Yes, sir.
I don't really even know how to start. I was wanting to say to Tommy and Amanda's family that I don't think the words "I'm sorry" are enough. I did write him a letter recently. Josh told me he thought it would be okay, but I was told not to contact him until just within the last month or so when Josh relayed through mine that it would be okay. The other thing I wanted to say, maybe I was hoping I could say this before I was sentenced, Your Honor, but I was heavily medicated for the first year at Central Prison, at least for the first year, and did not have a real clear state of mind and was in a state of complete disbelief. I'm still in a state of disbelief today, even though I know it's real. I talked to one of the psychologists up there one day and explained to her, I told all of these doctors and psychologists there the things that I'd done, failures I'd made. I told them what happened. And one of the ladies said to me, she said, and I'll never forget this, she said that from a psychiatrist and a psychologist's point of view, from a medical point of view, that they themselves wondered if prison was the answer to a mental collapse or illness. And she and I discussed the fact that people have drove through buildings and sidewalks that were later determined to have a heart attack or a stroke, and that the system acknowledged that and did not bring charges. Not that desperately I wanted to defend myself, and I was hoping for a trial before a jury, but as far as the folks saying that I was selfish, I talked to my family on the phone about that, and I told Diane that I wanted a trial, and then I talked to Rick, and Rick explained to me how lengthy and horrifying that would be to the family. At that point, I agreed that if there was anything left in me that I could do for my family was not have them suffer through a trial and whatever happened to me happened. I guess I've been so hurt by the fact that I was portrayed as taking this lightly. Your Honor, there's no way for me to describe the pain that I've been in. And Diane and I and Taylor, we talk every day. And I really wish, and maybe they did, I don't know, I really wish the state had listened to all of our phone calls where I've cried my eyes out to you. I have felt over the past 3 years, especially over the past 2, after things have been coming back to normal, that I'm nothing more than an animal. I told my brother on the phone, I feel nothing more than an animal in a cage. But I know in my heart, and I told one of the inmates recently when he was asking me what happened. For whatever reason, I felt like I needed to tell him. He was a young man. And I told him, I said, the thing that assures me the most is that God himself really knows. He knows what my state of mind was that day. Folks, there is not a man on this earth that loves and has loved his family more than I have. You've always wanted your daddy to be proud of you. You've always said that, even though I told you. You have reminded me through the years, Daddy, I just want you to be proud of. And Josh, I just want Josh to know when I tried, I have wrote him a couple letters. Well, let me just say this. I know there are people who hate me. I know that. I'm aware of that. And the fact is, I understand that they hate me. Because I've hated myself now for 3 years. I've hated everything about myself. So please, folks, know how much I love my family and Katelyn. I am so glad to see you. Papa is so proud of you. I am very proud of you, Katelyn. I have your picture on my wall, and I've had it on my wall. I look at it every day, and I smile at you and Kendall and Josh. Taylor, I'm so proud of you. Thank you all so much. There are a lot of people who have wrote me letters of support. I've had hundreds of letters of support who have said, and I don't even know how to say it. Caleb, you're a wonderful young man, and Kendall, and she's not in here. Kendall's not in here. I couldn't see her. She's a wonderful girl. And Caleb, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry that I didn't make the right decisions, I guess, when I found out that I was suffering. But I love you, Katelyn. I love you. Your papa has always loved you, and he always will. And I hope that someday, Katelyn and Kendall, that your dad will see fit to let you come see me and write to me and talk to me on the phone. I hope you'll come see me, Katelyn. I'm proud of you. I heard that you recently gave your life to Christ. That made me so proud. Josh, I'm so proud of you. You've always been a really special son. We had a great relationship. You're a wonderful man. So first off, I just want to thank you again, my family and friends, and also I want you to convey to the lead, at least the leadership of the church, that there's a serious, serious price to sin. A serious price. For 3 years and today, and for the rest of my life, that fear that I had of losing my family came true. And Diane, thank you. You're a wonderful Christ-like wife. You didn't deserve any of this, and we talk every day, and we cry with each other. And I can't talk about pigs on the phone. You can't do it. I can't talk about her. But I do want at least you guys to know, not to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I want you to pray for me. That for the last 2 years, every single day, I go in my cell, I will close the door, and I've laid on the floor and cried for hours from the losses that I have suffered. And I'm just so sorry that the district attorney's office viewed me as an intentional killer. God knows the truth. And someday, one day, I step in His presence. And everything that has happened bad in my life is the reason He died. That's the reason He died, so that we could turn to Him. But I thank you. Ronnie, I love you. Louise and Trent. Mama, you know I love you. Roxanne. I see I forgot some 3 things real quick. Georgia, and Alex. Alex is not here, but Georgia and Mark. I don't even have the words to describe the pain I felt for Alex and the love that I knew we had for my daughter, and probably still does. And I was thankful that Madison was able to take her place. I love her. And I hope the best for them. Melissa, I'm so sorry. This happened to you. Things right off. Alan, thank you so much for giving Kate the opportunity that you gave her. I really appreciate you giving her an opportunity to serve your department. And Your Honor, the only thing I wanted to say to this court, and I know that there's really nothing you could do. I know this is completely out of your hands, but I have met men over the last 3 years who have had mental illnesses that were inside a prison rather than somewhere where they could continually be treated and observed. But Your Honor, thank you for your time to listen to all of this. Naturally, I wished I would have had an opportunity before I died to hold my family again. I'm sorry. I've said it, despite what they have said here. I have been saying it to people. I've been writing people. I've been calling certain people. I don't make hardly any calls anymore except for my wife, my daughter, my brother, and my mom. Because of the pain. I'm going to die in prison, and then I'll be free. Because of Christ and His love for all of us. Thank you, Your Honor, for giving me so much time.
Ronnie? Thank you. Anything else for the state? Anything else, Mr. Green?
Kind of the only other issue is the defendant's exhibit number 3, I believe, the state, we have an order to seal that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anything else? All right, if we could take recess. Thank you.
All right.
No.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This honorable court of the county of Gaston is now adjourned Friday night. God save the state and this honorable court.
I keep it.